Hello everybody. This video is long overdue. It's titled Being Born. Here it goes. So we are human beings. By what definition? What is the meaning of being human? It's very important to understand this. Okay? So when a male and a female get together and copulate, and sperm makes its way towards the egg and eventually hits the egg, forming one single cell of two separate genetic codes, the codes of the parents, the DNA, which together are going to create a new single individual from those two individuals, which has both of their genetic code, their DNA. So what this means is the physical body is a continuation of the code of the two before, but only on the physical plane. This plane that we recognize. Here's where the problem lies. This plane that we recognize as reality is only a fraction of the entire reality. Because what happens when the sperm hits the egg and a child is born, living light enters this newly formed genetic egg. Do you understand? In a sense, the physical component, the egg that becomes the human, is a living body, robotic body, automated body. You could say even artificial intelligence. While the light that enters it develops into your consciousness, and your consciousness will always remain living light, known as the central nervous system by scientific terms. It's living light, your consciousness. So if the physical body ends up being damaged beyond repair, the living light that is your consciousness, that is the true form of you, just goes somewhere else until it finds a new body. So that brings into question the criteria for finding a new body, or why having to exit a body in the first place. Recently I listened to the audio version of the third book of Enoch about luminaries. Please do listen to it. It's accessible to all on YouTube. Why is it important? Because the luminaries are basically all that is light in our sky, like the sun, okay? Now in the book, Enoch describes very clearly the cycles of the sun and the moon, how they enter through one gate and exit through another. There are 12 gates in total, and how they enter and how they exit depends on the time of year, the day, the hour. Think of it as a universal clock. So the same thing happens for the sun and the moon, but it also happens for the luminaries, other luminaries, the planets and the stars. But not only there, also the wind, the water component in the atmosphere, the fire component, the earth component, In other words, folks, Enoch 3 in the Book of Luminaries pretty much says the earth that we live on is an artificial construct in every sense. Bodies to hold our light, and an artificial environment to support the body. Everything is artificial. And how did I come to this conclusion? I recently got introduced to the topic of mud flood. And this came after me researching a little bit about Great Tartaria, some ancient culture. Ancient is not so ancient because apparently they were around till the 1850s when they magically disappeared as a whole. Sounds like a genocide, right? And the problem with that is that they were all over the world. All over the world. And how do we know they were all over the world? Because similar structure buildings built more than 200 years ago still exist today, and the majority of them have the first floor at least partially covered in mud, implying that a mud layer went by after the construction of the buildings. You would ask yourself, why has it not been removed then after the mud went by, after it all stopped? And the simple answer to that is there was just so damn much of it because it was all over the world. Okay? There was a channel on YouTube. His name is Mudflood. Awesome channel. Thank you so much for all your work. But he clearly demonstrates through many pictures that all these buildings were built in the same style, out of the same materials, mostly stone or brick, red brick, and at some point were affected by a mudslide. So when you're talking about all the continents of the world, that instantly tells you one world culture, okay? Because you cannot have the same style architecture everywhere unless everyone was pretty much on the same page in terms of what meant perception of reality. So there was a mudslide event that wiped out many. So then I researched what could have caused such an event. And I came across this great, well, actually the name was 1815 or 1816 nuclear winter. I'm like, 1815, 1816 nuclear winter, what? And that's when I read that apparently some massive volcano erupted. I forget the name, it starts with a T, which caused so much material to be blown into the atmosphere that it covered the entire Earth, causing the sun to not be visible for an entire summer, really, maybe longer, which meant all the crops failed, it was extremely cold, it was literally a nuclear winter, except that they say the material came from a volcano. I have my speculations on what is stated. I don't want to get into that right now. So this event occurred, which in so many ways was like a reset. Why a reset? Because current history denies the existence of such an event. There is no mention of it in official publications. History does not want to remember where it came from, which brings into question another thing. Apparently, most of those people that lived in that time were taller than us, much taller than us, giants by our standards, which means that whatever the material in the atmosphere was, in a sense, radioactive. It caused mutations in the human race, and we became what we are today. Now, is this when the fusing of the chromosomes happened as a side effect? Perhaps. Or maybe it was by intelligent design, either through this event or a separate event. Which brings into question the next thing. If it was by intelligent design that the world ended up how it is today, then who was the intelligent visionary behind it? And the only thing that comes back forth to the forefront over and over is these individuals that are white with very large foreheads. So an average person should only be able to fit 4 fingers on their forehead. But then there are some that can stick their thumb and some even more fingers. So it's like, who are these people? Because obviously they're not like the rest of us. Well, they're ruling every aspect of society today. It took me a long time to figure this out. While I was blaming other groups of people, I realized they have a direct influence in all the events that occur on Earth. And unfortunately, they are infiltrated into every aspect of society. They rule the world. That's who the enemy is. But it's also possible there's an even higher force above them, which acts off this plane of existence, if you will. So, whether they are artificial intelligence themselves, or real, or living light, if you want to put it that way, doesn't even matter. What matters is modern society has been reduced to being born with a piece of paper that claims ownership of your physical body, and with the cultural system in every aspect of the word that makes you forget that you are a pure living light that entered the body, and you don't know how you ended up in this body. And for most of people, they will never figure out why. And we become disconnected from each other. But there are exceptions as well, as me, as others, that are finally starting to put the pieces together and realize this very simple thing. We are born into a total illusion of a world. Illusion because even the potholes on the street have a purpose. You did not decide that purpose, but someone did. Even where garbage gets dumped, especially in the oceans, has a purpose. You did not decide that purpose, but someone did. Which brings me to the next point about this. Every decision you take in life, whether it's to make more money, make less money, be family oriented, be sports oriented, be solitary survivor men oriented, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. Because whatever avenue you follow in life is still fully under their control. In a sense, if this world was a computer game, and the computer game is based on the mathematical codes, and within this virtual environment there are NPCs, or computer generated artificial personalities, characters you interact with, but just automated ones. Most of you are the NPCs. Some of us who are starting to awaken are no longer NPCs. we're ready for something more.